Hi there. I'm Elaine Petruccelli, and it's my honor. It's my honor to work with the best book selling team in the world. And I say that carefully because Senator Wyden's wife owns a bookstore, so I could get in trouble. But thank you all for being here. And some of you came from far away, and I don't blame you. This is important. I From the moment I heard that Senator Wyden had a book, even before I was scared to death every day, um, I I just could hoped that he would come here, and he did. So we're very excited. You know, it takes chutzpah is something my mother used to say to me when I said that I couldn't do something, and I didn't want to get up in front of people. And I was a little kid now, try and stop me. But anyway, I love this title and I love what it tells us about what we can do and also the difference between chutzpah and criminal lying behavior. so, uh, and those of us who have been following the senator know that from the very beginning, he has been a progressive, fascinating thinker and leader. I especially love knowing that he, as a young guy in his 20s, was working to get the Gray Panthers of Oregon started. Now, for me, that is really important. And so, but I don't know. We'll find out later a little more about that. But uh, to be doing that in your 20s is just amazing and kind of shows you a little bit about who we're talking to tonight. Excuse me. Uh, I also wanted to mention that I'm so glad you came to the bookstore, and so many people I see here who have been supporting us for 49 years. And I am very grateful. And also to the people who are out there all over the world watching this tonight. It's just so exciting that we are able to talk about this. Uh, my husband Bill is a big fan of Adam Hochschild, the author, and he got me reading Adam Hochschild because Adam wrote a book, Bury the Chains, about that started with a group of people who met in a bookstore in the 1860s, 1760s, excuse me, thank God he's here, um, when they had a great king, George the Third. You remember about George the Third. Uh, and yet they kept meeting and stopping the slave trade in England. Took a little while, another 100 years to stop it here, but uh, it was the beginning. And I hope that this store will be the beginning for a lot of serious discussions and a lot of coffee and a lot of fun at the same time because we have a lot to do. Uh, Senator Wyden was congressman first, and
You're not going to go into my shady past, are you,
no,
Elaine?
but I was going to tell about when you won an award at school, but as a senator, what I wanted to say is, as a senator, he constantly makes me very proud to be an American and to know that we have him with us. So I I really am so glad that you were here, and you are going to love It Takes Chutzpah. It's just the best. A lot of, by the way, a lot of politicians write books, or someone writes them. This is not like any other politician book I've ever read. And we're very honored tonight that Lisa K. Solomon has come up. Well, actually, she didn't come up from Stanford. She brought the senator up from Stanford because when she read the book and realized he was a basketball player at Stanford and there's a game tonight, she decided he had to come there and uh, meet the team. So I don't think you joined the team, but it was typical of Lisa, who is in the design school, the D school at Stanford. I didn't know what the D school was till I met Lisa. I thought it had something to do with what color to paint your bathroom. But I now know that it is looking toward the future and finding ways to make solutions and listen to each other. And lucky me, one day the person who was going to interview Jin Saki got a sore throat, and Lisa stepped in with no time to prepare and did the best interview most of us have ever heard. And so, poor woman, I am constantly asking her for the most important things. So, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Senator Wyden, for being such a force for good.
Thank you. Thank you.
It really is such an honor to be here. Thank you so much. Elaine, thank you for that beautiful intro. Thank you to the Book Passages team that helped put this together. Now, I know, Senator Wyden, and you've asked me to call you Ron, so I've got permission to do that, that your wife, of course, owns the Strand bookstore. And some of us have heard the Strand called the Book Passages of the East.
Right.
I'm not saying who, but I did hear that. But what a gift to be here just 1 week after the book launched, and what a time to be talking about chutzpah. So thank you, Elaine, for reminding us of the power of coming together in places of hope and ideas, and talking about important ideas. And I'm just going to echo Elaine and saying this is an extraordinary book. It is part memoir, where you talk about your history and your family, and part personal manifesto, giving us all ways to think about how we can flex our own chutzpah for positive change. It's part history book, where you will learn about parts of the Constitution and how legislation gets done. And it's part futures book, giving us a pathway of how to think forward, particularly in these dark times. And throughout, it's deeply personal. You put yourself out there in very vulnerable ways. And after reading it, I felt like we were friends. And now I think we actually are. So we're going to discuss all of that tonight, including going into the depth of the book and your rules of chutzpah. And I want to really thank you, Senator Wyden. You, I know, have been on a marathon. This was not the leisurely January book launch time. This is pretty intense. So thank you for being here. But I'd love to start with why this book. And I want to say how refreshing it was for you to say very openly up front that most political memoirs are usually an entree to another office, and often the presidential office. And you say very upfront, this is not that book. You are not running. But I just want to say, if you have changed your mind on that, we'd also be open to hearing
Cory
that.
Booker
Yeah.
says maybe.
Yeah, maybe, not too late. So, but we'd love to hear why this book.
Well, first of all, Lisa, I want to step back just for a minute and say a big thank you to Elaine. You know, I sort of feel like I'm running with the NBA All-Stars of books, because we've got Elaine, my wife at the Strand, and then, of course, Powell's, where we'll be in a week. So it is wonderful to be able to be with all of you. And Elaine, to you and Lisa, thank you for those unquestionably inflationary introductions. You know, inflation's bad if you do it to some political type, no permanent damage. And I also like being back in the East Bay area for a couple of reasons. First, friends of 50 years are in the front, the Remmels, the Lurches, and the Hoffackers. You can probably tell from the book a little bit about our friendship. They basically all took me in when I was a lonely kid in Palo Alto, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And this is really a unique time in American history. I think that we are faced with what amounts to constitutional lawlessness. And we saw a bit of it just in the last 24 hours. We're going to want to talk about that. We're going to want to talk about chutzpah. And the reason that I wanted to be with Lisa is that she is so good about talking about how people really look more deeply at the big questions in front of us. And that's why I think chutzpah is so important. Chutzpah is basically the instrument, as we say in the book, the indispensable instrument for making the world a better place. And it kind of got started early because the founding fathers saw those Brits and they had a hell of a lot of chutzpah and told them to go fly a kite. And that was the beginning of America. And we're going to need a lot of it today. And that's why we talk, for example, about Ron's rules of chutzpah, like never miss the unexpected moment. A lot of my life is framed by basketball. So we say leading is coaching. And I'm amazed at this area's interest in basketball. I did some show yesterday called Bay Area Today. Maybe you guys watch it in the morning. And they said, hey, you used to play some basketball, back in the day, and you weren't so bad. And some guy had told me, yeah, chutzpah, is that the same thing as hoopspa? And I said, nah, not really the same thing. But I said, I remember playing in the East Bay. We had an East-West All-Star basketball game. My buddies, I'm sure, remember this in the summer of '67. And I recalled Mike Caruso, an incredible guard at Bishop O'Dowd High School. And so the announcers just went off on that. I mean, the show was over when we started talking about Bishop O'Dowd. So it is great to be back. And I can tell you these have been some extraordinarily difficult days. I was on the floor of the Senate last night before I began my red eye, odyssey dealing with the Hegseth vote. I mean, Hegseth basically said that he wasn't interested in the requirements of the Constitution. We talked to him about illegal orders. We talked to him about what happens when the government wants to kill an unarmed person. There are provisions in the Constitution that apply here, and he just kind of blew them off. So to me, chutzpah, if I was going to start it in a sentence, it's about big stuff, like getting our constitutional system back on track. And we don't have something every day like we've had in the last 24 hours where the president just told the inspectors general, our watchdogs, go get lost. You can't do that. The law doesn't allow it. So we got big things involving the Constitution. And then we got a bunch of smaller stuff, like the work with the senior citizens. And to this day, I get a call from somebody who's in their 40s and 50s and who might be an engineer. And he says, Ron, I remember you and the Gray Panthers. Well, Ma had problems with her Medicare Part A or Medicare Advantage or something. What do we do? Well, she's not interested in some big highbrow lecture about, the history of Medicare. She had a problem. And frankly, that's one of the things we've got to recapture in order to beat Trump, is to show that we can deliver for people in a better way. Because I can tell you, Trump is going to turn back the clock on the senior citizens. He wants to take away the authority to negotiate holding down prices. He's already signaled that. So we got a lot to do. But let's have some fun tonight. It's Saturday night. I think, in the Bay Area, and it is really good to be with people where there's a shared history and a commitment to really saying, with this book and in lots of other ways, we're going to turn this thing around. A lot of people, and I'll close with this for the opener, tell me, Ron, I'm thinking about moving to Spain or somewhere like that. I say, no, you're not. No, you're not. Abraham Lincoln would not want that. Abraham Lincoln would want us to stay and fight. And I think that's what we're talking about. And chutzpah will make it easier. It's in all of us, that sense of boldness and guts and grit. And basically what we got in the rules is a way to polish up your chutzpah and go to work. Okay? Thank you.
So welcome to chutzpah class. Here we are.
The chutzpah party.
Yes. So we're going to talk for about a half hour, and then we'll turn it over to you. So start thinking of your questions. We'll have time for that. And I love that we are turning this to a Saturday chutzpah party. And I also loved about the book that it is about your time over 45 years in public office, first Congress and the Senate. But this book is for all of us. It really is. And in the opening, I love when you say, progress not only remains possible, it is real and happens every day. So that this book is not just for those people in positions of leadership, it's for all of us. I will show you how and why. I'm determined the United States will surmount this moment of stress in our constitutional system as we've overcome earlier tensions. All it takes is chutzpah. So thank you for that. I want to move into some definitions of chutzpah because turns out chutzpah may not mean everything to all the people. So you have a very distinct definition of chutzpah, connecting it to purpose and moving things forward. And I wonder if you could just say a little bit about chutzpah as a concept and how you see it before we get into some of the rules.
Well, its roots are originally combination of Yiddish and Hebrew. And chutzpah is inherently good. Let's be clear that Donald Trump, who apparently likes to use the word quite a bit, has misappropriated it, warped it. You probably recall that at one point he said that he could shoot people downtown Manhattan and his friends would still be with him. Chutzpah, that kind of chutzpah is what bullies use. People who try to exploit others, take advantage of their power. So chutzpah is inherently good, and it's everything from helping people on the block, for example. If you know somebody lonely, knock on the door. Maybe you kind of act like you want to mow the lawn, but you're mostly there to chat and listen and go pick up some ice cream for them or whatever it is they want. It comes in small sizes, large sizes, and a big part of it is those kind of rules that that we lay out. That a lot of them come from my government experiences, but things like never miss an unexpected moment, particularly with all the digital communications that we have today. There is so much information moving in so many different directions constantly that if you see something that really gives you a chance to change events, don't miss it.
I love that. So it's sort of an awareness of not missing opportunities. And I want to start with rule number 1, which Elaine wonderfully teed up, really happened. It seemed that you learned it before you got into office at the ripe age of 29 when you first joined Congress. But you were 24 and you started working on behalf of seniors in Oregon and helped start the Gray Panthers, which, by the way, I think is one of the greatest names of all time. Gray Panthers. I hope someone has trademarked that. And you dedicated your life towards helping these seniors get the kind of care, attention, protection that they needed. And you did a lot of creative things to, as you say in rule number 1, make some productive noise. So I wonder if you could take us back to that.
It kind of began, as these things always do, in an unusual way. I wanted to play in the NBA. That was all I wanted to do. That's what all my friends know. I got a college scholarship to Cal at Santa Barbara. The real story that my friends have picked up on, because we hung it up in the office, is I got a scholarship offer to Gonzaga University, which is a really big basketball powerhouse. Now, if I had gone to Gonzaga, I would have sat on the bench even more than I did at Cal. But I could have shown forever that a Jewish kid would be allowed to play with the Jesuits. So I wanted to play in the NBA. And when that didn't work out, and my friends know that that was a really tough time because I was back living at home, and my brother already showed signs of schizophrenia, and my mom was very upset. And I finally said, I'm going to think about going to Oregon and start over. It's a new place. I don't know much about it. And I volunteered. I'd never been involved in politics up to that time. John Lurch, at one point, said to some newspaper guy, because all my friends got quizzed by these newspaper guys, and they all stuck up for me, and they never told the truth. John at one point said, well, we liked Ron. We knew about the basketball. We didn't know he was much interested in politics. So I volunteered for Wayne Morris, who was one of 2 United States senators who voted against the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And we were driving around. He liked me because he would always say, Ron's the kid from up at the university. We'd drive around, and all these senior citizens would have problems with Medicare, because this was in the 70s. Medicare began in 65, and people were having problems, and they'd come up, Wayne, I got a problem with my Medicare. Can you take care of it? He goes, well, Ron here is going to look it up. And I go, yikes, I don't even know how many digits are in a social security number. And so we were walking out to the park one day after this started, and I said, Senator, what's the deal on this aging thing? I wanted to play in the NBA. I don't know anything about seniors. He goes, Ron, let me tell you, and this was the inflection moment. This is going to be an exciting field. We're going to have many more older people. They don't have power. They don't have money. They don't have clout. And it was absolutely true. These were the days when if a town had a lunch program for older people, that was like considered a big deal. Now you can be 20 years old or something and be an AARP or whatever it is, but they didn't have much of anything. And he convinced me to do it. So I spent a lot of time volunteering. At one point, I took out the phone book. These were the days when they had phone books. And I called all the attorneys in town there in the law school, and I asked all of them to give 3 hours a week helping elderly people. And nobody said no, because nobody had ever asked anybody to do that. And then we went to the legislature and talked about the price of generic drugs and the like. And finally, after a few years, they said, we don't like our congressman. And I didn't know much about him either. And they said, give us some names of people that we'd like to maybe run for Congress. So I didn't know how to do that other than go to the library, and I came back with some names. They took the names and said, we know who we want to have run for Congress up here. And I said, oh, who's that? They looked up and they go, you. I go, yikes. I didn't know anything about it, and I was pretty dubious at the beginning. And then one of them made the sale by saying, Ron, just remember, nobody can say no to their grandmother. And so that's how I got involved. They went out and put up all the signs and made all the phone calls, and I was the youngest person Oregon had sent to the Congress in a long, long time. Not the usual path.
No.
Chutzpah for sure. And you can even see some of the part about, did you guys catch some of the part about canvassing with the naked man?
Okay, I'm going to ask you.
That's not in Politics for Dummies, I can tell you that.
So I definitely want you to tell that story, but I've been told they can't quite hear you in the back. So
okay.
I want to make sure if you're going to talk about the naked man and the Twinkie.
Okay.
Yeah, you can talk about.
You want to hear about the naked man now?
It's a party, is it?
It is Saturday night, nudity. So I really was coached to put on a blue shirt and some khakis, kind of tights like these, and walking shoes and go door to door. And I should say, good evening, sir. My name is Ron Wyden. I was director of the Oregon Gray Panthers, and we're helping seniors with their energy prices and their housing and keep them from getting ripped off and bum. And I would very much like to talk to you about some of the issues that are important to you. And I was told to keep my eyes on their eyes. And so I started this whole thing, and I looked down and I went, oh my goodness, no clothes. And a dog and no clothes. And I tried to see if there was any kind of precedent for what she did. But suddenly I ran off and I said, thank you for listening to me. And he clapped, which I thought was kind of nice. And I said, maybe this is chutzpah. Maybe this is a moment where it's intended to be. I certainly didn't expect it. It was an unexpected moment where I had to think of a few things to just, be polite. But I think it would be fair to say most of public service does not start with trying to talk to people who are naked eating a Hostess Twinkie.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that the story of working with the seniors and how in some ways serendipitous it was and how these patterns have kind of come back in your life. I think it's worth noting that Wayne Morse, you ultimately took his seat, not took his seat, but occupied that seat. And I love there's so much reverence that you talk about him in your book where you say it was essentially a political science mobile classroom that you just got to watch him and be with him. And then your work with the seniors just also seemed to set a way of showing up in the world where you are listening and serving and not charging ahead with your own ideas, the way that you represented the seniors. And I love some of the stories where you talked about going to rallies with magnifying glasses and all kinds of things to help the seniors feel like that they really had someone that was working on their behalf.
These were the days when fast-talking insurance salespeople could go door to door and sell seniors 6, 8, 10 policies to supplement their Medicare. And they weren't worth the paper they were written on. And I'd knock on a door and I'd see a senior and they go to the back of their apartment or somewhere like that and they bring out a whole shoebox full of policies. And you just knew that they were wasting money. They were being ripped off. They could have used that money to have bought a good dinner or some shampoo or some of that kind of thing. And I said, we're going to get something done about it. So we made a little bit of headway at the state level. But when I got elected to Congress, I teamed up with Tom Daschle, who was then the Senate Majority, leader, and we basically beat the collective insurance might of America. And I remember we were up all night working on it and just busting away to try to hold them back. And I came home, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, I saw a newspaper, and there was a picture of Tom Daschle and I on the front page of the paper, and it said something like, "Triumph." That was the headline in the New York Times, "Triumph." I don't remember the exact word. And then it talked about this was the beginning of finally saying that consumers and older people weren't just going to sit around and be ripped off like they'd always been. And so those kinds of things are what you remember, not because somebody says it's a triumph, but it just gives people the confidence that they can go on, which is a big part of chutzpah, is seeing that you can make a difference. You can help. Whatever is important to you, it might be your job, it might be your community, it might be your family. You can make a difference by being willing to use these concrete steps to make your case and get stuff done.
It's a beautiful story that, again, we see in all of your work with some of the most major legislation that has appeared in the last number of decades, whether it's focusing on climate, focusing on jobs, on energy, just this idea that we can do better. And you talk about this often throughout the book around your connection of tikkun olam as a fundamental value of repairing the world, and what really gives you the purpose to keep going on that.
Jews really think of chutzpah and what it means, a tool for doing good, with the other side of the coin being tikkun olam, which is to repair the world, to make the world a better place so that during your lifetime, on your watch, you made a difference. It's why I feel so strongly about what we're going to be dealing with here over the next 4 years. And maybe it'll only be 2 years, but it looks like it's going to be 4. And we got a lot of work to do. What I've seen in the last, couple of weeks, and the velocity at which it is taking place. For example, I was already on the way to my all-night flight when I read about all these inspectors general being turned down. It was the same way when I heard that Mark Zuckerberg caved to Trump. Mark Zuckerberg basically kissed up to Trump, told him that he'll take away the fact checkers and all the things like that. And I can tell you, Mark Zuckerberg is on his way to reconsolidating the big powers in American communications, just the way it was before the internet. But it came out of nowhere. There weren't press releases about how it was going to happen or something like that. It just came. And now I and a handful of others are pushing back. But that's what we're going to have the chutzpah to do. Same thing with the tax code. My goodness, you'll hear a lot about that. And I'm the point person for the Democrats on taxes. I mean, the distillation of the Trump economic plan is pretty easy. Give the breaks to the guys at the top. They're going to get the tax breaks and cut Medicaid and hunger and all the things in order to pay for it. So we have a sense of what's coming, but it's going to require a big push, and the push has to come from the bottoms up, because top down is like Washington, D.C., and Trump's got hold everything with an iron fist.
Well, that ties into another rule that you have around playing the long game, right? Really making sure you're holding on to where we're going, even in the midst of what feels like, honestly, whack-a-mole amygdala hijacks of everything happening, is knowing that you have an obligation to try to make the world better, to do what you can. And I want to talk a little bit about something that's just an extraordinary story very early on in your career that feels like we're kind of reliving again, even though you worked on this in the early 90s, which is your early fight for women's healthcare and reproductive rights, and how when you were in Congress using your chutzpah, you actually created a subcommittee. First, you used your chutzpah to get on the committee, and then you used your chutzpah to create a subcommittee specifically looking at regulation that ultimately led to your fight to get mifepristone legal here in the United States so many decades ago. And I wonder if you can share a little bit about that story and where we are today.
And also, as part of that story, Lisa, I think it is pretty clear that in government, in business, in life, lots of stuff is not linear. You don't just go from point A to point B, and then you go, done, victory, call it a day, go to the beach. And that's what we did in the fight when I was a young congressman to get the non-surgical abortion opportunity for Americans. Mifepristone, my wife says it's pretty hilarious, but C-SPAN actually has put the whole hearing up on the air of my hearings to get mifepristone legalized. Cory Booker said I had a Jewish afro, but it was a battle then, which essentially is the same battle today, which is whether science is going to decide or politics is going to decide healthcare issues for women. And you know who was the big opponent of it? Some people in this audience might remember the name Jesse Helms, the big right winger. We found in the files when we went looking tons of mail from Jesse Helms saying, oh, women shouldn't have this, the sky's going to fall in, and the like. And so we held off George Herbert Walker Bush from going with Helms. Bill Clinton came in. They called us up a few days later, said we're going to do the science. We had some of the tests at the Oregon Health Sciences Center, which my constituents were thrilled to be part of. So we then had 20 years of women being able to use it. It got to the point that this was used for about 50% of all the lawful abortions, in America, 50%. And now we're back in the same battle. And you might have seen the story this morning. There's some other drugs that may complement mifepristone, and we're worried that Trump is going to try to sit there and squelch the ability of women to get those. So these kinds of battles are ones where you play the long game. And the other one is in the chapter at the end about the clean energy tax credits, which really broke 50 years worth of gridlock on climate change. But now I'm up against exactly the same thing. And I was one of two who voted against the Trump energy appointees because I think they got their eyes on gutting that. But playing the long game, it's hard to do because with all our devices, everything militates in favor of doing everything quickly. If you get a text at 9:50, you want to respond to somebody at 9:55. We got to also play the long game.
Well, when you read the chapter, and I'm not saying if, it's a when, because you have to read this chapter, there's so many just minor things that you did that I really want to highlight. One is that you did all of your own research. So I know your father was a renowned journalist and writer and taught you about fact-checking and doing your own research. So these great vivid images of you up in the library doing research. And the other is going wide to get support. So the way that over years you harness support to overcome what was really I don't want to say propaganda, but a policy, a sort of communication argument about why this drug should not be here, a religious argument versus, as you said, a science argument. And you're just absolute grit and determination to keep going amid all those headwinds.
I never thought after we held off Jesse Helms in the 1990s, Bill Clinton came in and made it clear he was going to do it by the book. We would have it for 20 years. Never did I think that we would have such a powerful movement now trying to turn us back. I don't know how far, back to the back alley abortions. I don't know. But the reason that we wanted to call it progressive change, the real important part is the progress part. We're in favor of making progress. They're talking about turning back the clock. And Donald Trump is so powerful around the fact that he's got the megaphone. He has figured out a way to be basically the only story in town. And that makes him very, very key to trying to shape all of these issues. And he knows it, and he's changed since the first time, the first time you might recall, he got mad at all these journalists. You remember that? He doesn't care about them anymore. He now has basically laid out an agenda where they need him, he doesn't need them, with Truth Social and all his resources, which is why we have to use our chutzpah to push back at it.
So I want to complement having the long view with another rule of yours, which is essentially about how progress gets done, where you talk about day to day. You can think of it simply as start good things, stop bad things, right? On a much more micro level. And I really want to dive into this, going back to the athlete's metaphor, knowing you're a basketball player, around balancing offense and defense, and how we think about where we put our energy and how we both continue to try to move important positive things forward while also recognizing that we have to react and put energy towards stopping the onslaught of the bad things.
I think that we all know that a conversation that involves just a negative is not as powerful as a conversation that involves a negative and a positive. So I've been very upset with the early signals of the Trump tax plan. But you probably may have picked up that I got the nominee for Treasury to accept that we would be able to have another year of something called direct file. Have you heard about direct file for taxes? Yes. Where basically you get on the phone with the IRS and you get out from under the tax prep people. Tax prep people think that this is the biggest horror in the history of Western civilization because they make tons of money filling out these returns around government that around your return where they already have the information. And so most of Western civilization allows you to get your taxes done for free. It's a basic service. And we wanted, Senator Warren, myself, a handful of others, we wanted direct file so you could get on the phone and save yourself $500 or $600. And we created enough pressure that the Trump people basically said, all right, we're going to give it another year. We're not going to fight it. We give it another year and hundreds of millions of people use this again. We're going to be in a stronger position. And the tax prep firms, set your clock by it. They are going to flood your TV sets with advertisements about how the government is taking things over and they don't have the authority to do this and you should only give them $400 or $500 if you want to have your taxes done and the rest. So you've got to try to have something that shows people you're moving things ahead while at the same time you're saying, are we really going to turn, Medicaid and hunger programs and the like into pay-fors for the special interests? And so you've got to have a positive and something that shows that if you don't act, there's something bad coming.
Well, I think that's a great just initial takeaway, is to be mindful of the language that we use, which is also another theme in your book, about how we talk about these important issues. Are we just talking about them in the negative or in the positive? You talk very openly how you think some of your colleagues are maybe not the best marketing communicators in the world, thinking about the Green Deal, calling it instead the Renewed Deal, or how we think about, even in your early work in seniors, that you don't say this isn't about insurance, this is about helping your grandmother. So really connecting.
And we're going to have to all think about, our messages. I thought, for example, that we didn't handle the food prices issue very well here in this last election. And in our part of the world, it was incredibly powerful. We had Albertsons and Kroger and talking about mergers and all this kind of stuff. But the vice president was asked about the issue, and she said, yeah, we're going to do something about food prices. We're going to stop the gouging. And when it was just left right there, it left a great opening for the far right to say, they don't know what they're doing. They're just going to give you price controls. It's going to be socialism. They're going to take over. So they went through a couple of rounds of it. They talked to Gretchen Whitmer and all the rest. And anyway, we were at the convention. They called up and said, would you go on the business shows and talk to us about it? And I said, I will, but make sure you know what I'm going to say. And they go, okay. And I said, first thing I'm going to say is I'm chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and we Democrats believe in marketplace forces. Big pause. Everybody says, huh? And then I said, and when the market doesn't work, we want really strong guardrails to protect the consumer, to make consumer gets a fair shake. And by the way, we can do this pretty fast because 31 states already have guardrails. Like California, like in this fire thing, if you have huge fires and somebody tries to buy up all the toilet paper, they go bust them because they're abusing, the marketplace. And so when I said that, the Harris people looked at me like I had just discovered, America or something. And, we said it worked well, but by that time the damage had been done. We're going to need to make sure we have stronger, clearer messages. And part of that is going to be to have the chutzpah to get together and start working them out earlier.
Yeah. Well, we're going to turn to your questions soon, but I'm so excited that you have a posse here from Palo Alto that you grew up with.
It's a dangerous crowd.
It is Saturday night, let us remind you. And you have a wonderful chapter in your book, one of your rules, around leading like a coach, leading as coaching. And you really talk openly about a foundational experience you had playing on the Pali varsity basketball team, one of the first freshmen to be on that basketball team, and the influence of your coach, Clem Weiser. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about.
He was the first adult who really, because my parents were the least athletic people on the planet. John's dad was wonderful to me, Paul Lurch, but I needed to find some ways to move forward. And what really started it all is that we lived on Garland Drive in Palo Alto next to a little alley, and nobody had really been through the alley before. And I walked through the alley and I found this basketball sitting right as I got out of the alley in a hoop. And I started shooting and shooting and shooting morning, noon, and night. And I said, I can do this. And best of all, I can meet some people and maybe meet some girls. And, there weren't very many Jewish kids. And so I wasn't handing out any St. Christopher's, and that was kind of lonely too. And so when I was at Jordan Junior High, and these guys were all our star football players, and I said, I don't want to get the stuffing beaten out of me. I'm going to focus on basketball. And when I came to Pali, I was a sophomore, and they needed rebounding in particular. And I just was crazy about the coach. And I especially liked and wrote about it, the way he handled people. And one memory, maybe my friends remember this, but I was a sophomore player, and I was a pretty good rebounder. Not great, but pretty good. And there was a senior, his name Chris Clark in there, really good guy. He was a football player. I'm sure John remembers him, Chris Clark. And Chris Clark was a forward too. And the way my coach, Clem Weiser, talked to Chris Clark and talked to me, both of us were happy. Chris Clark was incredibly kind to me. I saw him later in life. He said, oh, you're a great senator, and blah, blah, blah. And, leading is coaching. Leading is coaching. And when we put together the clean energy tax credits, which broke 50 years worth of gridlock, I basically tried to use much of what I learned from Clem Weiser. And so when we won a couple of Senate seats in Georgia and we had that opportunity, I walked right down the rostrum from person to person and tried to figure out ways in which, we could bring everybody, along. And Bill Bradley, the great NBA player, who is a great friend of mine and has stayed in touch over the years, we like to say the finance committee's had two college players who had jump shots, and one of them is in the NBA All-Stars, and the other one was a college scrub. But he has a wonderful analysis of what a good coach means in John McPhee's legendary article, A Sense of Where You Are. And a big part of getting things done today and working with people, you can learn from a good coach, because leading in sports is coaching for life.
It's worth noting that among the other accolades you have is how long so many of your staffers and people in your office have been with you, which speaks to the kind of leader you are, because it is not easy work. And just where you talk so beautifully about the importance of a coach facilitating everybody to do their best, to bring their different talents forward. And also what an influence Coach Weiser was on you on how to have respect, not just within your team, but when you go to other teams, and really the precursor of what it means to create an environment of belonging, of caring, of inclusion. Probably one of the only Jewish players on the team.
People thought Palo Alto was kind of removed from some of the social kind of challenges of the time, but I remember and wrote about it in the book the day before we played at Ravenswood in East Palo Alto. Coach said that we weren't going to dress. We weren't going to dress in East Palo Alto. We were going to put our stuff on. We're going to get on the bus. We're going to play the game. We're going to come back. And I had always had a special relationship with a lot of those players. Charles Lowry, who's mentioned there, went on to play in the pros, won the Stars at Ravenswood High School, was a particularly good friend of mine. We were at that high school all-star game that I mentioned, and that was hard coming to grips with the first instance. Maybe everybody else has different first memories about Palo Alto, but to see, Palo Alto as a place where you couldn't dress like you did at every other road game really, struck hard.
And his sensitivity to thinking about the experience for you and others.
And Cubberley High School, I think everybody remembers, had a lot of problems, a lot of racial problems.
So we are going to turn to your questions in a minute, but since we're talking about athletics and basketball, there are just a few more stats I want to put out there. So just going to be quick here because we don't have it all night. But over the course of your 45 plus years, you have hosted 1,101 town halls, which is like almost 48 a year, or 40 a year. And then I calculated, because if each one's about 90 minutes, that's like 100,000 minutes of listening to your constituents. So that's a pretty extraordinary stat. You've also stopped by or eaten at every one of the Fred Meyer grocery stores in Oregon. Always good for a good snack. Do you every year visit all of Oregon's 36 counties?
Every year.
It's amazing. It's amazing thinking about the plate. We already talked about some of your accolades as a varsity basketball member of Pali High, but folks may not know you were also voted Pali's most fun to be with, which I thought was excellent.
When that happened, and I think everybody remembers the reunion we talked about it, my wife said, "I'm asking for a recount."
Well, another important stat I would say is that you are the first Democrat in the country to come out for gay marriage equality really early on. And
well, if I can mention just one thing on that, because this relates to these social issues that are getting so much attention, and we know that this is red hot politics, and you can trump them up beyond anything that resembles what really happened. And I think that those of us who believe deeply in liberty and freedom need to figure out more direct and straightforward ways to talk about it. And what happened on the gay marriage issue during the Senate campaign, when nobody had ever heard of it, this was 15 years before Barack Obama and Joe Biden and everybody had come out for it. I got asked coming out of a press meeting or something about a Hawaii decision on gay marriage, and I said, well, gays ought to have the same rights as everybody else and all the rest. And the Democrats didn't like it. The gay community didn't like it because they thought I was being too far advanced. And everybody scheduled a press conference for me to clear things up. And I said, I'm not going to clear anything up. I'm going to get up there and say, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get one. And I have said nothing on the subject but that since that day. And I think what we got to do on these social issues is we got to show our support, and then we got to say something that I've been trying out lately. I'm a live and let live Democrat. And particularly for adults, that ought to do it. But we don't want to get dragged into these extended discussions about the bathroom here versus the bathroom there and all this kind of stuff. We want to show we're for people being able to make their own choices on matters that are left to them. And we can come back On the other, people saying you're supposed to be for small government. What do you mean you're talking about big government managing everybody's private decisions? I think this is really a big area and important one.
And I will say that straight talk, is throughout the whole book about all the bipartisan conversations and action and movement you've gotten to make, which we don't have time to go into. But it's just extraordinary about again, I think it's a great example of focusing on the long term, making progress, figuring out how to meet people where they are to move it forward. All right, we have some time for
questions.
Yes, absolutely, we are.
We have a request for you to hold your mic up a little closer so.
Saturday night at Book Passage.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. As a former retired civil servant, I'm particularly dismayed by the Trump administration's efforts to gut the civil service. And I'm wondering if you have some comments about that and what you all plan to do about it.
On one matter with respect to this, the Social Security Fairness Bill that we got passed into law before Trump came in was a little bit of history, and the Republicans did not know what to do about it. This was trying to help people on Social Security who'd had a variety of jobs over the years. In other words, they had their 40 quarters in Social Security, but then they had jobs that weren't covered by Social Security and the like, and we wanted to make sure that they could have a dignified retirement. And we put it on the floor, and this was one of the moments that I've been telling my colleagues that we ought to pick up on. The senior Republican on taxes went to the floor and said, "Oh my goodness, this is going to break the bank. Oh, this is going to be terrible. This is a huge deficit, raiser." And I let him go on for a while, and I basically got up and said, "Are you kidding me? This Social Security bill is a fraction of the $4.5 trillion you guys want to spend on your tax bill that helps the people at the top." And so he kind of stopped talking, and I said, "From now on, we're going to call this the tale of two deficits, so that, when the rich people and the affluent people, are getting all their tax breaks, that's still money coming out of the Treasury, and we're going to compare that to some of the costs for the programs for the vulnerable." So good on Social Security and civil service. And the second point of your question is Trump is going to try to unravel a lot of those protections. I don't know what it'll do about Social Security, because he's been all over the map on that. But in terms of the jobs, there's no question he's going after those. He's already doing it. He's firing people. We're going to push back.
I just wanted to say thank you for the direct file. I have done that with my adult children.
Did you do it already?
3 times. Not for myself,
Bravo.
but for all 3 of my adult children. It's great. I don't understand why people don't do it more. It's free.
It doesn't happen because the tax prep firms want to take $500 out of people, and we're trying to stop them.
Which I told my children, why pay when you can do it for free? You don't need TurboTax. My question is actually related to last week. Trump established his own crypto coin, the Trump coin, which I think has a $12 billion market cap initially and is now about half that. And since you're on the Senate Finance Committee, that to me seems like a very dangerous tool for all kinds of manipulation of him and his ability to manipulate other world leaders with his own private currency. I'm wondering what you guys are going to do about that.
I'm already beginning the watchdog process there, because he has got so much money sloshing around in these various accounts, and his family has been into it. He's been into it, and he's talking about things that involve his private interests and government, interests. Look, crypto is an area that you have to proceed carefully on, and I've tried to do that since I was chairman of the committee, and I had to block the bipartisan infrastructure bill because we were going to take $50 billion and spread it who knows, where, without any explanations. And the first thing is, crypto took off because it is one of those parts of the American economy that eliminates middlemen. And I think that's one of the driving influences in the American economic system. In fact, if that was one thing that we're trying to see if Trump might do, is go after the middlemen in the pharmaceutical area, the pharmaceutical benefit managers and the like. So that's what the rationale is all about, is, trying to stop middlemen. And certainly, we know that some of the aspects of the research arm also make sense, because maybe we'll have some healthcare card that will allow you to be anywhere around the world, and blockchain will have come up with it. But this last 2 weeks with Trump and crypto doesn't add up to me. It adds up to something that looks ripe for corruption, and I'm going to be watchdogging it very carefully.
We have a question from an online viewer. Do you think Pete Hegseth will be successful? And I'm not sure successful at what, but maybe you can just talk a little bit about how he's going to affect things.
I'm very concerned about his position at the Department of Defense. Senator Reid, a decorated military, leader, has said he's going to watch it. I mean, you're going to have to take his promises. I mean, he said, I'm not going to drink. So what does that mean? I think that I'm especially concerned about his responses to the question of constitutional transparency, and talking about, is he going to comply with, direct orders? What's he going to do about the rights of Americans who are unarmed? He didn't answer those questions at all. And I think that this is a nominee that certainly, if past is prelude, we better be watching.
There was a question in the back that was quick to.
Hi there. I heard you on NPR and then heard about this talk tonight. I was like, this guy is awesome. We got to go check him out. So I brought my 13-year-old who's back there half listening, but I'm hoping some of it is sinking in. But as a Democratic voter, I would say the last few months have been really difficult. And I felt like we emerged from this last election with our tail between our legs a little bit. And so I'm just wondering, for you, as you're looking forward and you're seeing what's starting to unfold, what is giving you hope?
What's giving me hope is that political change does start at the grassroots. I mean, here we are on a Saturday night in the East Bay, and we're talking.
Right. North.
Are we in the North Bay? Oh, my apologies. I was in the East Bay playing basketball, a subtraction of it. So here we are in the North Bay. We're talking about issues that are important to people and what we're going to do about them. The people here are not talking about moving somewhere. They're not talking about saying they're giving up. And I think we know what the issues are. For example, what I've really focused on are the issues where the second word is bill. Might be medical bill, might be rent bill, it might be electric bill. Trump dominated the economic issue in the campaign. There's no other explanation for it. Now he's going to write a tax bill that isn't going to help people with those things, but he's going to help the billionaires and the people at the very top. So I think we have a chance together to paint a very different picture than he was doing in the campaign. And by the way, he's trying to already rewrite history. Did you see what he said about food prices? Donald Trump in the campaign, this is an example of how information moves in America. Donald Trump said in the campaign that he was going to lower food prices. You'd be able to go in your grocery store when he was president, you'd have lower grocery prices. And 10 days after the election, he walked it back. He said, we're not going to really be able to do anything about it. And there was a little bit of a fuss for a day, but then it went away. So what we're going to have to do is show that, yes, people want economic change, but Trump, starting in 2026, isn't giving them the kind of economic change they want. The people at the top are going to get economic change, not them. Give you another example. Did you see the promises he gave waiters and waitresses? He's going to do that. He's not going to be able to do that in 2026. because you've got to adjust, essentially tax opportunities and payroll taxes and the like. He's not going to be able to show it for 2026. So what we've got to do is, just as Lisa is saying, is point out things that don't work, point out things that do. You're going to be able to use direct file now. You're going to save $600 in a few weeks. I mean, those kinds of things add up, and that's what we're going to have to do. Does that respond to your question? You think we got a little more to do? I think we got a hell of a lot more to do.
Logic always translates when there's ideological, what's the word? Considerations.
Yeah,
Yes, I like what you're saying, and it feels like there's some other different kinds of mountains to climb.
we got lots more to do, but part of chutzpah is to get started and keep coming back at it. It's not. That's what playing the long game is all about. You're not going to get it done in the first minute. People going to make mistakes. So I'm in the North Bay. I corrected my mistake. Yes,
Yeah.
right there.
We have one back here.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I agree about the messaging. I think that's really important. It's almost like Democrats need a better PR firm or something and spokespeople. But my concern really has a lot to do with all the misinformation that's out there and how widespread it is. It's like a malignancy. And the way young boys are getting their information, like the Bro Brothers and all this stuff. How do we handle that? I feel like it had played a big role in the last election. It's like there's so much misinformation and it's so widespread. It's like, and now Facebook, is it going to do fact checking? Like, how do we deal with this?
I think you ask your elected officials to be here in the community, being available for questions, talking about what's going on more than they've ever done before, because they're a conduit for information that's current. I told you what happened last night, and you can hold them accountable because there's an election coming up. I say in the book, there aren't a lot of town hall meetings in America anymore. People much rather kind of just put something out that's, media controlled and the like. And I don't know who your members of Congress are, but now's the time when you say, we need you here to help us combat the misinformation. Lisa told me I'd spent 100,000, did you say 100,000 minutes listening to my constituents? You may see that once or twice. But I think the point is, we have elected officials for a reason, and that is to be accountable and to help us deal with these big questions, and the misinformation is right at the start of it. That's why I was kind of stunned when I asked about the food prices. Trump made that a huge issue in the campaign. He was going to lower grocery prices, and 2 weeks later he said he didn't, but I looked around the audience and maybe half of the people maximum knew about it. On the other hand, we had something to say. I got 25 senators and House members to go on the brief saying that the Kroger-Albertsons merger, which would have been the biggest food merger in American history, was going to be bad for the public, and we won. It was a judge from Oregon, by the way, who ruled on that. You were yes.
So I think this is probably the last question for our time.
We'll make sure we get everybody. She doesn't have it. I'm going to repeat it all too.
I'm a scientist with the state of California, and we are watching as the federal servers are being wiped for the information on the NIH and the Health and Human Services and the US EPA and you name it. And so we're scrambling to download as much information as we can. I'm wondering how much the public is aware that this is going on, and that what is going to result is that Americans are going to get sick and they're going to die, whether it's lack of FDA oversight, lack of USDA oversight, on, regulating meat industries or what have you, and how we can fight this because it's really catastrophic.
Okay. I'm so glad that you brought it up and when, because apparently we're getting close to the end.
Oh, can I
Would
just
you-
ask? Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat the whole thing. What you just talked about was Exhibit A of what your elected officials need to be doing and what I'm going to offer to do for you. The comment was, we've got a scientist who's watching all of the servers and the computers and the technology be swept clean so that the Trump people can pretend that something's going on that's different than what our friend who's a scientist knows is going on. That's what it's about. And she wants to know what can be done to stop it. And what I'd like to offer you is at the end, no matter what we do here and when we finish up, just get me an email and a phone number. I will get my people on it right away because I never have heard it said quite as clearly as you. We've suspected that they're already playing, with the records. But if you can give us some information specifically on servers and the like that are being wiped clean, I will bring this up. I will make it as visible as I possibly can do. Thank you. The chutzpah.
Yeah.
Somebody shouted chutzpah. Well, I guess the real chutzpah deserves to be awarded to our friend here who's the scientist. But I don't see my doing something that should, be given a Nobel Prize for. That's what elected officials do. Is elected officials listen. There was a real issue talking about erasing stuff on servers from somebody who's a scientist who really understands it. And that's why I said you're kind of exhibit 101 for what we need to do. And I'm going to make sure that I get it all on my phone and write it all down.
Thank you so much. I would also like to ask that you make the point to the American public that it's our tax dollars that paid for all those experts to do all that research and put all that information out there. And you're actually stealing from the American public when you take that away.
Great.
CDC,
Great.
FDA.
Great. 3 cheers.
So the comment was that the American taxpayers are paying for all that. So by erasing it, you're also stealing from Americans and stealing from our future. And I just want to, again, point out.
No leaving tonight until we exchange the information so I get it, okay?
And you make this point in the book about the difference between ideologues and ideas. And that is a great example of an idea, of something to do that comes from something that you see and notice that is actionable. And thank you so much for your responsiveness and for sharing, because I think it's going to take all of us paying attention.
Lisa, and I know Elaine's going to say something. I'd like to give a lengthy closing address too. Of about 3 minutes before we wrap up. Elaine, why don't you go ahead?
I don't think I have much to say here. As one of my in-laws says, I'm gobsmacked. I cannot believe, first of all of you here and online, we can do so much more. And with Senator Wyden, I love that last comment. I'm speechless that this just happened in Book Passage. So I'm not going to say anything else except that afterwards, go buy some books, and we'll need a few minutes just to set up the signing table. So stay, and if when you get in line you need more books, don't worry. Someone will give you your place back. We're always there for you to buy more books. But the main thing I want to say is I am so inspired. The dread I felt ever since the election is suddenly turning into I'm going to do something. And I hope that's true for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine.
Yeah.
Go ahead, and then I'll finish.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, really just closing with gratitude so much for you, Elaine, for your team, for opening up your party place here of books on a Saturday night to have this conversation. And of course to you, Senator Wyden, for being here really like taken a red eye and another red eye just to be here in the North Bay. Um,
I'm never going to live this down.
and well, you were the most fun to be with, so we know that from history. And I just really want to thank you all, and thank you for bringing your 13-year-old daughter tonight, because you really do model that every day you get up thinking, how can I make tomorrow better than today? And I've heard you say time and time again, you can defy the odds. You can defy the odds. And I just think there's no more important message for all of us to remember that we are capable of doing that. I just want to maybe quickly say, I know we're getting close. I was saying to Senator Wyden, my very first job was working for a United States Senator as well, back in the early 90s. And I remember, this is Harris Wofford from Pennsylvania for all my Philly friends, go Birds tomorrow. I remember that I was 21 years old and I think we got to win this important election. I remember them saying, well, they'll tell me how to do this. And my biggest lesson of that entire just incredible year of working on that campaign was there is no they, right? You are the they. And I think you are all really incentivizing us all to say we are the they that is going to continue to work hard to put our country in the place and our communities in the places that we want to be. So thank you so much. And thank you for writing this book, The Chutzpah, to write a book on chutzpah. So thank you.
Lisa, thank you to Elaine. I don't want to make this a bouquet tossing contest, but what a wonderful, wonderful community service this is. And like, bookstores are everything, and I'm not particularly objective on the subject, but you have a wonderful one, and I appreciate it. So I told you I was going to give you a lengthy closing address, and if somebody back there says they're going to give you a closing address, start inching towards the door, because they are really deadly affairs, and I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to wrap up by saying thank you, thank you. I mean, on a cold night, you came out and we talked about issues that we believe we're going to be able to make a difference on. And I personally think the kinds of things we're talking about, we can make a difference on by 2026 when there's another election coming up. That's what I've been saying about the waiters and waitresses. I've been telling everybody they're not going to get those changes in their taxes by 2026. I know that. And the same is true on a number of these, issues. And I don't believe that we need to do anything at this point except say we are going to pull out all the stops at every step of the way to find these examples and show it's not a good use of taxpayer money. It's not a good way to protect our health. That's why that last point was so pivotal, because somebody was in a position to get really good information. And one of America's United States senators happened to pass through town tonight. And now I can get it. I can have people look at it. I can make noise. We can build it. There is no question in my mind that the topic that your neighbor has just brought up is going on all over government right now, probably tonight. There are people doing what you just said in terms of wiping this data, off the screens and off the systems. So we've got a lot to do. But I want to know, I think that you're capable of doing it. And that's why I want to be on your side. So thank you for tonight. And let me tell you, we are just getting started. Bring your chutzpah. Thanks, everybody.